Hey everybody, Gromos here with another Was on the Simulator Battle video. So this time I'm going to take a look at the lower rank aircraft, the P-40E. Now the P-40 I covered once already in a video in an event versus the Japanese, but since the plane still got requested every now and then, and it recently got a battle rating change, I thought I'd give it another go, this time in the Q versus the Germans to mix it up a bit. Well then, let me give you a bit of an overview of the plane before we take a look at a few fights in it. Now, the P-40 was of course developed from the P-36 Hawk, with the biggest initial difference being the replacement of the radial engine of the P-36 Hawk with an inline Allison engine. At the time, most modern fighter designs were developed with inline engines to take advantage of the smaller frontal silhouette, which allowed the plane to reach higher speeds because of less drag. So while the P-40 initially did not have any more power than the P-36, it was a bit faster. Now, the P-40 was a sturdy design from the start, giving it an ability to withstand damage, but also making the plane a bit heavier. Still, the first P-40s did not have much armor protection or self-sealing fuel tanks, which was changed pretty quickly though with the P-40B, which received more armor and self-sealing fuel tanks. With the P-40E, the version of the P-40 we have in-game, the plane got a slightly stronger engine and was a little bit faster than earlier P-40s. The protection was increased once again also, and the armament was improved as well, but again this increased the weight of the plane. And that shows one good trait of the plane and one bad one. The good one being the plane with its sturdy construction and decent armor protection can withstand damage fairly well. I think in-game this is partially presented. The plane can at times take quite a beating, however I don't think the 5 wing spar wing design is probably represented in the damage model yet. Still, the plane can often get back to base with significant damage. Now, for the negative part, the weight. The P-40E, with all the weight it gained, has a very bad power-to-weight ratio, also because the engine performance is not that impressive. So the P-40E has roughly 310 horsepower per ton. In comparison, the LAX 3.8, the earliest LAX 3 we have in game, has about 330 horsepower per ton. For the BF-109s it is likely to meet, the BF-109E3 has about 420 horsepower per ton, the F1 and 2 have about 430, and the F4, which the P-40 could meet with its old battle rating, 480 horsepower per ton. The lower power-to-weight ratio of course has a negative impact on the P-40's climb rate and acceleration, though as far as top speed goes, it is almost as fast as the P-109E3. Since the P-40 has a pretty big wing area, it does turn pretty well though, better than a P-109F and slightly worse than an E. And the P-40 has a very good roll rate, which you can use to your advantage. So that combination of decent turn rate and good roll rate make the P-40 quite maneuverable, if it is above a certain speed, that is. That is of course something that you have to take into account. The heavy P-40 will lose speed pretty fast in turns and won't build it up back very quickly, at least not in level flight, because of the poor power-to-weight ratio. The plane does accelerate well in a dive though, so it is advisable to always have a bit of altitude to play with. Even 400 meters instead of 200 can make a big difference. It just gives you room to build up speed while maneuvering and keep up an edge in maneuverability. In dives you have to be careful about the control stiffening though, which is quite heavy on the P-40. Now that's realistic, but most other planes in Warzone don't have it modeled to the same extent. And armament wise, the plane has 6 50 caliber machine guns. I had mixed results with them on the P-40. With the armor piercing incendiary ammo you get fires fairly often and you often knock out the pilot, but if you don't do either of those things, the effect of your hits can be a bit disappointing at times. In my personal opinion, I still think that most machine guns in-game, heavy and light, are not performing quite like they should. Now, the P-40 also has a bit of a tendency to be unstable around the yaw axis, making it sometimes more difficult to get enough hits on target. So that might also lead to a slightly worse result than for example on the F4 Wildcat, which is more stable. Now let's talk real quick about the battle rating change. The P-40 used to be on 3.0, now it is on 2.7. Now, within the current battle rating system, if you want to call it a system, I would say that is okay. That's the same battle rating than the P-109E and the P-109F1, which would be the main opponents when the plane entered service in the desert. From the introduction date, the plane entered service at a similar time than the P-109F4, which the P-40 with its new battle rating won't see anymore, but that is more because of the rather high battle rating of the F4. The P-40 with its rather low power-to-weight ratio gets a bit of a boost from the battle rating to counter that, but nowhere near as much as other planes do. For example, the LAX-38 with its slightly higher power-to-weight ratio and cannon armament is placed only on 1.7, while the LAX-366, a plane from late 43, is placed on 2.7, the same than the 2-year-older P-40E. Just another small example of the randomness of the current battle rating system. Well then, that's some basic info about the plane. Let's take a look at a few fights in it. This first one, a short one on the Roar map, is not particularly successful, but I think it is a nice example for the maneuverability of the plane in, for example, rolling scissors. Now, as I said at the beginning, the opponents in these videos are Germans, at least in theory. In this particular game, it was actually mostly captured Yak-1Bs. After finishing one off, I approach a fight and attack a second Yak-1, but I don't quite get a shot, so I pull up, loop around, and come back down for another attack. As I come back down, the Yak-1 pulls up and I get a chance for a shot. I fire 2 bursts. The first one is a bit too high, but the second one is on target and I get a few hits. The Yak rolls around and turns back into me, passing in front of me, and I fire another burst, but it seems it goes a bit low. Now the Yak-1 dives down and comes back around, and I pull up to get some altitude and get above the Yak. However, I am pretty slow at the moment, so I don't have the speed to get very far. I keep an eye on the Yak to see if he has enough energy to come all the way up to me as I get my nose back down, and it seems he does, so I evade and pull up again, hoping the Yak doesn't have the speed after pulling straight up like that to follow, but he does, and the Yak accelerates faster than my P-40 with its poor power-to-weight ratio, so since we're both slow at the moment, he will get closer with his better acceleration. Luckily, there are enough friendlies around, so I can just evade, either giving my team a shot or maybe getting an overshoot. Luckily, I was on sufficient altitude, and while doing a few narrow barrel rolls using my better roll rate to evade, I also point the nose down to speed up, which gives me enough speed to go up in a wider barrel roll and get the Yak in front of me again and fire a burst as it passes in front of me, getting another hit. The Yak-1 pulls up into me again and I roll around and pull up. The Yak-1 leveling out behind me again. I go into a barrel roll to the left to evade and hopefully give the friendly planes a good shot. And then I turn towards the Yak again, which turns into me again. I can see that I pass in front of the Yak, so I roll level again and pull up to hopefully pass above the Yak-1 side, which can't roll and pull up as fast. I did again build up some speed since my nose was pointed down during the initial evading rolls, so I have the speed to now pull up in a wider barrel roll and roll around the Yak. As I do so, I slowly get behind again and the Yak passes in front of me, but not quite enough to get a shot at it. As I come around though, I stall the plane a bit, which stops my barrel roll for long enough that the Yak can gain back some ground and it will pass behind me again, so again I roll level and pull up as the Yak passes behind me. And then go back into a barrel roll towards the Yak, which ends up in front and above me. The Yak though, when rolling back, uses his rudder when he comes around to get his nose around, and I again level out and pull up to keep the Yak from getting a shot. I push the nose back down and roll around again, this time almost getting a shot at the Yak, but not quite. The Yak this time though does not come back around again, as it is losing ground in the rolling scissors, but keeps up his turn, and I pull up and do a wing over to turn around and fly towards the Yak again, which is also turning around and coming back my way again. The Yak apparently wants to go for a head-on, but I don't, so I pull up as we close in and loop around to go after the Yak as it passes behind me. I come around and try to get a shot at the Yak, but my aim is pretty unstable at this point and I don't get a hit as the Yak passes in front of me. As I turn around to follow the Yak, I can see a BF-109 behind the A-20, and since the Yak seems to be leaving for now, I go after the BF-109. But that one gets taken out by a Cobra before I get there. The Cobra, however, has another BF-109 behind it, a BF-109F, so I go after that one. I get a hit on the wing and turn after the BF-109, which is now going after the A-20. I close in on the BF-109 and attack, but at this speed after maneuvering the P-40 can get a bit unstable and I only get a few hits before I overdo it a bit and stall the plane. I recover and pull up again, and just as I do so I can see the Yak again, which passes me and goes after the Cobra, so I follow and go after the Yak-1 again. I am pretty slow at this point and my plane does not accelerate very well, but with the Yak turning after the Cobra I can close in on him and line up a deflection shot, and I fire 2 bursts after the Yak. I do get hits which do not seem to impress the Yak a whole lot, so I fire another burst after the Yak without much result, and eventually the Cobra goes down. Now, After the Cobra goes down, the Yak goes into a turn, and I know the Yak 1 turns better than my plane, especially at this low speed, but I hope the plane is damaged enough by now with all those hits and the holes visible in the wing that its turn rate is reduced, but apparently it is not. I can't turn with the Yak, so I go up in a high yo-yo turn, regaining a bit of altitude as I come around, and then descend a bit towards the river to get a bit of speed back. When I look back though, I can see a P-40E coming in from behind, and I have to roll around to evade as the P-40E attacks. It seems the P-40E is going after the A-20 after passing me, and I come around to go after it. But the Yak 1 is coming back, so I have to focus on it. I pull up and get ready to roll around and dive back down again to evade, but this time I start a second too late. I take a hit, which takes my plane's wing off. Now, I have said at the start of this video that at times the P-40 can take lots of hits and stay in the air. This is not one of those times. Now, as I have said, not one of the most successful battles, but I hope it showcases some rolling scissors to evade attacks in the P-40. I found it important to have a bit of altitude and not to be too low, since the P-40 gets slow pretty quickly. You want to have some altitude to turn back into speed, since those kind of rolling scissor maneuvers do of course have quite a bit of vertical element to it, unlike flat scissors, and you want some speed to do them properly. And it is also important to keep an eye on your opponent while doing defensive maneuvers like this. Rolling and turning around randomly usually does not do all that much. You have to react to what your opponent is doing, to when he will get a shot at you, for example, so you have to see him. Well, I was quite busy the last few weeks, so I did not have that much time to fly and collect material, but let's take one more look at one short engagement in the P-40, this one on the Norway map. Now, this is one of those times where I joined via the join in progress, and planes were already engaged over the airfield on the island in the middle of the map, so I made my way there as fast as possible, trading some altitude for speed. I spotted the Heinkel 112 as I approached and adjusted my heading to get behind it as I approach. I fire a burst and knock out the pilot, and then I can see a friendly plane in trouble further in front of me. It's a P-40 being attacked by a P-410, so I keep flying that way and start to attack the P-410. Being still pretty fast, I close in fast, but my nose is not quite trimmed down well enough, making it a bit harder to get my nose on target, but I still get a few hits and the P-409 goes down. Sadly too late for the P-40. As I look back, I can see a plane behind me, so I take evasive action, and then I can see that it is a second P-410. Now, I of course turned better than the P-410, but in a flat turn the 110 could still get lead on me for a bit and fire a deflection shot, so I go up in a barrel roll instead. I can also soon see a second plane, a G-50, which I can't outturn, behind me. However, two friendly planes also show up and attack and finish off the P-410 before I can get behind the 110. But I can now concentrate on evading the G-50. Now, the G-50 turns much better than my P-40, but it is also much slower. For a bit I think about simply outrunning the G-50, but in that case it could still hit me. But since there are friendly planes in the area, I instead use my roll rate to stay out of the G-50's sight. This way I can't really get distance from it, but the idea is simply not to get hit while my teammates take out the G-50. After a bit the G-50 has to react to the attackers and breaks off its own attack. And it looks like I can get behind it now, so I pull up and pass above the G-50, planning to roll down behind it when it passes below me. But the G-50, as I pass above it, pulls up and attacks again, so I have to turn out of its way again. However, shortly after, the Wildcat behind the G-50 takes it out. And I pull up and start to climb to regain some altitude. At first I thought those were all the enemy planes in the area. However, as I take a look around, I notice some AA fire on the other side of the airfield, and I can spot another friendly plane under attack, a P-36 chased by a P-409. So I turn around to help out the plane under attack. I'm still pretty slow, but I can build up at least a little bit of speed in a slight descent. The P-36 and P-409 behind it turn towards me, and the P-409 gives me a bad angle to attack, so I come around in a slight high yo-yo turn to get behind the P-409. Now I can level out behind it, but I am too slow at the moment to catch up to the P-409 fast. However, as the P-409 turns after the Hawk and passes in front of me, I can line up a deflection shot and fire a burst. I did not expect much from this burst, just hoping for a hit that distracts the P-409 from its target, but I get lucky and hit the P-409's fuel tank and set the plane on fire. The P-409 dives away towards its base, and I'm not sure if he's out of the fight yet. The fire could still go out. but 2 other planes are already on the P-49's tail, so no reason for me to chase it any further, and I go back to climbing to regain some altitude while keeping an eye on the P-49 and the friendlies behind it in case some more enemy planes show up to help the P-49, but none do and the P-49 goes down. But just looking behind me I can see more AA fire, so there's another enemy plane nearby, and this one is on higher altitude. As I get closer and I get a better look at the planes, it appears like another P-49 attacking yet another P-40. However, they are higher than me, and with my plane's bad climb rate I can't really get there fast. The P-49 fires on the P-40, which goes into a spin and starts to lose altitude fast. I hope the P-49 might follow the P-40 down, giving me an opportunity to attack it, but the P-49 just fires one quick burst and then pulls up again. There are however more friendly planes in the area, and some of them seem to be in a better position to attack. The B-36, while slower than my P-40, has a much better climb rate thanks to its much lighter weight, and seems to be able to get close enough to the P-109 to fire. The 109 starts to go into a shallow dive with the B-36 and the Wildcat following. I do however see another plane a bit further in the distance, and I don't know yet what it is, so it might be an enemy plane. So for a second I fly that way, but it turns out to be another P-36, so I look for the P-109 again. The P-109 used the speed it built up to regain some altitude and is higher again and in a slight climb, which I of course can't follow. The P-109 climbs much better than my P-40. Trying to do so would put me at a disadvantage. Instead I change course and fly away a bit, planning to circle the area at a bit of a distance while climbing, hoping to get eventually above the P-109 if it keeps attacking the other friendly planes. However, the B-36 a bit higher than me starts to attack the P-49 again, and I hope they may lose altitude in their fight. So I stay a bit closer to keep an eye on them in case they lose some altitude. Now, the P-49 apparently has enough with this many enemy planes nearby and starts to dive away, coming my way, and diving is something my P-40 does at least as well as the P-49E, so I come around and follow the P-49 as it dives past me. I can close the distance a bit before we level out, and the P-49 goes in a slight climb again. Now, while I could get closer in the dive in a straight line or a shallow climb, the P-49 is faster, so it will soon have a speed advantage again and pull away. So I fire a long-range burst hoping to get the P-49 to turn. Thankfully, one of the things the 50 cal armament is really good is spraying at large area at a distance, so I get a few hits and the P-49 does indeed start to take evasive action, allowing me to catch up again. I get a few more hits and a deflection shot and then follow the P-109 as it dives back down. I fire a few more bursts after it, but I don't get any more hits, but it seems the P-109's wing is already damaged, maybe from an earlier burst, and as the P-109 pulls up in front of an island, one of its wings drops and it goes down. Now, with this plane down, there's only one enemy plane left on the enemy team. Since I'm a little low on ammo now, I decide to land and rearm before going back up and looking for the last enemy plane, but my team finds the last enemy plane pretty fast, the JO-88, and shoots it down, so this is it for this fight. Well, I thought it would be interesting to make a video on the P-40 with its new battle rating, and I think I may cover a few of the other planes with new battle ratings as well. For example the Yak-9, whose new battle rating I have a lot less understanding for. Well, and this is it for this video. As always, I hope it was entertaining, thanks for watching, and maybe I'll see you next time.